Okay, so I'm gonna keep running. So where I was going with that last one is that, so as you hear that bird like that, that bird goes in that the former video in this same series, with my feet in the thumbnail, you hear that bird chirping like that, and it does sound beautiful, but you actually don't realize that that's actually very powerful. You could say that's a form of power. Maybe we could say all things, all beings enjoy power. Even animals enjoy power. You hear like a dog barking. That's a form of power that the dog is somewhat enjoying. Maybe you could say that some of the barking of dogs, like I have a neighbor that barks, a dog that barks incessantly and somewhat it feels violently, even though it's a small dog. It's very formidable and ferocious the way that that dog barks, and it asserts itself. It's somewhat arrogant, and it feels arrogant for something to bark like that and assert itself like that over an environment and over other beings, to be heard by other beings, because we can imagine it's being heard. Now, I'm not by any means trying to argue or get mad with a cute puppy, but it is yet grating and daunting. But I want to say that actually might be a force of habit. As much as there might be some necessity of doing it, I thought that maybe the dog is lonely, but it also might just be simply a habit. And habits are powerful for beings. We can maybe say habits are as equally addicting for animals. That also powerful. So I was thinking some of the ferocity of a dog. Now, some people have actually pointed out, like if you hear someone like I'm talking like this now, I think the author Tashreeq Bey has said that erudition is a better word than education, because education may actually refer to animal husbandry, that is rearing human beings in mass numbers and hordes and conditioning them to abide within a work setting, a society similar to a farm, similar to I don't mean to reference slavery, but like similar to a plantation, a farm, a manor in times past, similar to livestock, is the general education, generally speaking, as it's been handed down from some of the overhauling and oversights of the education in the early 20th century. And I don't mean to get myself strung up by not citing sources on that, but Tashreeq Bey himself on YouTube, Grand Chief Tashreeq Bey, does have content that speaks to that, and he can defend those statements that education as we have it has altered our concept of history. It has at least deprived the K through 12 of the trades as they once were, and also it has stripped etymology from. He says that etymology should be handed down right with spelling, right with the parts of speech, and that it would actually reveal some of the real history of words and history itself, and also facility around words. But that's just some of the examples of how education has been watered down in his opinion. And he actually showed a matriculation exam from 8th grade into 9th grade around the time of like maybe the 1860s or 70s. And if you could appreciate how difficult that exam was for those students then, it would confound your history in itself, because you would say, because they had a question on there like name 13 appropriate uses for a capital letter, is what he cited on there, is what they were teaching students at that time. So actually education may have been far more advanced and sublime than we can appreciate at that time. And even my own grandmother, if you could appreciate her handwriting, now she still grew up in the 20th century, but it was closer to those older iterations of education. And the attention to detail, the grammar, the etiquette, the spelling, the penmanship, even mathematics. They did longhand mathematics. There was a priority on education and even just tact and manners and gracefulness in society in general across ethnicities, races, that had access to education. And because I think there's been different of access, there's been different levels of education and access to it. But I think generally speaking, maybe some may or may not agree that all races and ethnicities in the 20th century, at least in the United States, that did have access to education, going back into the 20th century, there was actually some strong points in the past that may have been actually stronger than what we have currently, at least in terms of value and how education is approached. But so a stronger word than education would be erudition, according to Tashreeq Bey. And erudition refers to things like sublime things like true artistry, real philosophy, original philosophy, higher grades of mathematics, creating original things, contributing to the human experience, the humanities, is erudition according to him. But all I meant to say is that, so you're doing something like that, you hear that bird like that, and you would say, now I don't want to be the first one to argue with the bird, but you would say that bird is beautiful, and if that bird actually distracts me. So I want to say some things are so I'm talking like this, like what you could roughly say erudite without sounding arrogant. But if I were to speak if I were to speak in a different cadence, different grammar or vernacular that made me seem like I had read less books or would care less about books, that actually might make me more respectful or formidable, because you would say, well, if he doesn't care like that, then he might not care about employing violence. He might not care about being incarcerated. He might not care about consequences. Therefore, he could put up more of a fight. So there's actually something more formidable and even respectable in terms of foreboding and presence and aura, in being a little bit more what would be considered ignorant, roughly speaking, which I don't know that anything is more or less ignorant than anything else, because over learning something, over knowing something, over saying something can be as redundant and weak as doing less of something. So you could say that someone who would appear ignorant or not having the polish and the properness, quote unquote, would be dumber, but they actually be maybe way more efficient, way more eloquent, way more formidable, way more smooth than being proper in itself. But all I meant to say is that within a dog, some of the self-belief of a dog, it can be appreciated as maybe arrogance or ignorance, but also it's a form of confidence. So when a dog starts barking, it's gonna overbark you, it's gonna overwhelm you, because it doesn't doubt itself, it doesn't overthink itself. It's somewhat ignorant and arrogant at the same time, yet confident. And that's some of the formidableness of a dog. Even a very small puppy, or that puppy, it's a female puppy that I live next door to, and I've been through a lot, and I still have something of a sex drive, like after as much as I've been through. But that dog has a lot of balls, even though it's a small female dog. But what I meant to say is that it also might be a habit. So some of this stuff that with the birds chirping like that, it might be a form of power, because you say, so these birds, they're always looking down on us from a bird's eye view. You look down on someone or something long enough, you can't help but feel a little bit entitled. That might be one of my actual blind spots as a person, because I'm a little bit taller, and I'm not used to people being taller than me. Some people would say I tower over people, but I don't have the attitude of that. But you could say maybe I do somewhat look down on people. And I don't know that being tall is any advantage over anyone else or anything else in terms of anything. But what I would say is that if you're satisfied with your height, if you enjoy your height, you may not second guess your height or doubt your height. And in that sense, it might be a grace and a favor in terms of just confidence and believing yourself, and not being in the habit of second guessing yourself about that about that hang up, which yet all of us have hang-ups one way or another, try as we may. But what I meant to say is, so birds, yet they actually are always looking down on us, and they're so eloquent with their singing, and you could say their singing is affecting us, maybe at least subconsciously, even consciously, and giving us, you can actually appreciate. Sometimes imagine you're walking someone, like imagine someone's hunting. This is the opposite way, and they're whistling at a deer or something like that. Their whistling is going to affect the way that deer moves and gravitates in an environment very subtly, yet very profoundly, because it actually changed the position and therefore the vulnerability and vantage point of a deer. But you could say that these birds are doing a similar thing with us in general, and maybe with other creatures, where I've thought that maybe these birds are actually something of like the ethers, the actual balances of a day, the balances of power, the balances of action, the balances of outcome, the subtle influence that is regulating what happens in a day and what is about to happen in a day and what had happened in a day, the singing of these birds. But it also might be very powerful sensation to have that vantage point. Now, we think of something as being small, as being weaker, yet another tradition such as India, sometimes, according to Arthur Avalon, some of the traditions of India, they appreciate things that are subtle as more actually potent and more forceful, more formidable, more efficient than what is large. An example is that you can imagine like a dog sometimes. Now, a dog doesn't stand nearly as tall as a human being, and it's very supple and svelte is a dog, almost as svelte as a cat, similar like a cat. Yet that dog is very efficient and very therefore powerful. And a dog can get up all over a human being, even a tall, towering human being like myself, because it is yet so efficient and balanced and centered and squared. And you could say that a low center of gravity is as great as it can knock over a high center of gravity. So the dog might actually be bigger by being smaller. So you could say maybe these birds are actually bigger by being smaller, and they're so eloquent and smooth with their singing that it's very powerful to have that vantage point and that influence. And so I'm going to say that might be addictive for birds, and it's part of that incessant singing, but also regulating human and maybe animal affairs as a form of like ethers that is existing around us at all times, but we're not so much consciously aware of it.